walking virtually along the world's most revered footpaths and connecting the global community of pilgrims. It's the Sacred Steps Podcast, available on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. Broadcasting from the Shaymare Studios in Florida, here's your host, pilgrim, backpacker, and author, Kevin Donahue.
Buen Camino, pilgrims, and welcome back to the Sacred Steps Podcast. I'm Kevin Donahue. I am so excited to debut today's episode with Justin Skeesuck of the book and film, I'll Push You. Many of you know Justin's inspiring story of crossing Spain on the Camino de Santiago in a wheelchair with the hands and feet assistance of his best friend, Patrick Gray. Justin and Patrick's story is such an inspiration to so many pilgrims. And we're going to be talking about the movie, but also talking about a new project Justin and Patrick have to make the Camino de Santiago accessible to pilgrims of all abilities. If you're considering the Camino de Santiago, but your physical ability has you questioning a pilgrimage like this, check out the show notes for the links below to Patrick and Justin's new project, Accessible Caminos. Now, before we begin, I want to highlight a couple of happenings on the podcast. The first of which is we have a brand new website at www.sacredstepspodcast.com. And it's got a new design, and that's great. But the feature I'm most excited about is the ability for you to leave a voicemail for the podcast. If you're planning a 2022 pilgrimage, I would love to hear where you're walking. I'd like to include your voicemails on our future episodes, especially as we're talking about some of these historic footpaths. So whether you're walking the Camino de Santiago or you're just walking in your own hometown, go to sacredstepspodcast.com and send me a voicemail. And I think I should mention that the reason we have a new website is it's our, what do you even call this? It's our birthday, it's our anniversary, it's our podiversary. 1 year celebrating starting the podcast in December 2020. So as you're listening to this, we have celebrated our first year with more than 25 episodes on the podcast. I started this show to feel more connected to my pilgrim family, and I am so grateful to be walking virtually alongside you. Thank you for sharing the podcast on Facebook groups. Thank you for sending it to people you know who are interested in walking a pilgrimage. Thank you for going online to Apple Podcast or Google Podcast and leaving a review or a star rating. Thank you for following us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and checking out our new website at sacredstepspodcast.com. Now, if this is your first episode, let me say welcome. You'll find all of the information from today's discussion, our links, the books, and program notes that we're talking about down below in your app's show notes. You'll also see them on YouTube as well as our website. I would encourage you to click subscribe so that our upcoming episodes are available to you automatically on your device and app of choice. I also want to say thank you so much to the 40-something pilgrims who joined us for our Camino 101 live stream earlier this month. We had a lot of fun talking about the Camino from a beginner's perspective and sharing tips and advice for planning a first Camino de Santiago. That episode is online. You can check it out. It was a lot of fun. We'll have some other Camino 101 live streams coming up, so follow on Facebook or check out sacredstepspodcast.com for scheduling of those. If you are planning your first Camino, hop over to YouTube and check out our Camino 101 playlist. These are short 5-minute videos talking about very common questions that beginners have for their first Camino. Everything from how much should I budget for the Camino and how many days should I plan on walking, to what apps to use for the Camino de Santiago. Should you take a sleeping bag? What are the routes to Santiago de Compostela, what's an albergue, and lots of common questions about the Camino de Santiago. That's over on youtube.com/sacred steps, our channel exclusively on YouTube. Now, without further ado, let's begin our episode with our guest, Justin Skeesuck of the film and book, I'll Push You. Justin Skeesuck, welcome to the Sacred Steps podcast.
Hey, thanks, Kim. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I have to tell you, I was, and we were talking a little bit before the show, I was having these big fanboy moments because watching I'll Push You touch so many people, and you must get that all the time, right?
Yeah, I do. Never, I don't know if I really set out for that. Or Patrick and I never really set out for that. It was just one of those things where, okay, we're going to do this pilgrimage and then we're going to capture it on film. And there's kind of a story behind that. But anyway, it was just, it's a blessing to be kind of a catalyst for that, which is really cool. Never thought in a million years that would happen. So
many pilgrims have been inspired by the story, whether it's a story of faith, friendship, love, brotherhood. There's so many messages in there. I want to talk to you about another one that stood out to me a little bit as well, and that's what a challenge it is for those who have mobility impairments to do the Camino. So before we get out of here today, let's spend a little bit of time talking about that. Justin, you've mentioned before in interviews that your mobility impairment has continued to decline as you've advanced in age. And it's a situation that you described as being, you go through spikes where you have periods of sustained mobility and then a big spike where something changes in your life.
Living with a progressive neuromuscular disease, it does get worse over time, and it does get it's one of those things where I have to constantly adapt, and I have to constantly learn how to redo things in my life that I guess the average everyday person does just without thinking. Like, for example, brushing my teeth. I've had to learn how to brush my teeth 4 or 5 times. Just the actual act of it, trying to figure out how to do that. Sometimes I have to have people help me. But I've learned that that life is too short to just kind of hope one day that we're going to live life and that things are going to be, great one day, work, at least here in America, because I know you have an international audience, but, we're groomed to, that's the thing. Like, you get up and you go to work, you go to college, whatever, and then you go to work and then you retire, and that's when you live. And I just have a problem with that. I just don't see it that way. I see it as, okay, life is meant to be lived. It's a journey that we're all on together. Some of us have a longer time on this planet than others. In my case, it's, the kind of writing is on the wall. Eventually I'll probably end up passing away due to the disease that I have. I don't pass away from it, but it's usually complications from it. So like, I can't breathe on my own and those kind of things. And, just when you're faced with with that mortality, with that kind of writing on the wall, it just forces you to see life differently. It forces you to see, like, it's not, why would I want to wait to live and enjoy this life that we have? Of course, you have to work and you have to keep things moving forward. That's just part of living, right? But kind of turning it on its head was where, I lived in Italy for a little while, and this is kind of their mantra, which is, they work to live, not live to work. So, I've just kind of taken that piece and just try to apply it every day of my life. And there's days where you just get work done and that's it. It is what it is. But I always look for opportunities to enjoy life. And so living with a disease that does get worse over time, it almost shortens that for me. And I just want to enjoy every time that I have, every moment that I have here on this planet. Yeah.
You've talked before about your decision, almost decade ago now, 2012. You were at a different point, and you sat down and said, "I wonder if I could do that Camino." I think you've talked about, you saw it on PBS and you were talking to your wife, who was extremely supportive, and you went to your good friend Pat and said, "I think I'd like to do that one day."
Which is way outside my norm, by the way. I'm not I'm not a go out and let's go hike for 500 miles type person. I'm happy on a beach somewhere, just enjoying, kind of enjoying the scenery. But, learning about the pilgrimage, it's through Rick Steves, he's a travel guy on PBS. And I just knew, I don't know, man. I don't know if you've ever had that experience in your life where it's just, you just know. I don't know how it's going to go. I don't know, exactly the reasoning why at the exact time. It wasn't laid out for me. It was just, I just knew I need to go do this. And, I do. I'm lucky. I have an amazing spouse who is not only my wife and the love of my life, but also she's my primary caregiver, and she does so much for me. And so, but she's also, throughout all of that, she's always encouraged me to pursue my dreams and to pursue, some things that just don't make sense. And she gets that. I think we've lived enough life together where she's like, yeah, I don't know the answer either, but I know that you can do it. Cause she knows that when I set my mind to something, I'm probably going to do it. So, well, at least I'm going to try. And, so then I asked Patrick about it, and, Pat and I have known each other. If you're, those who are not familiar, we've known each other literally our whole life, born 36 hours apart. And so we, there was nobody else I wanted to do it with. And so I asked him, and he said, yeah. And, we had no clue what we were getting ourselves into.
Well, and I think that's pretty common, right? Like, people get inspired to do these trips, and we've talked about it on the podcast, whether it's somebody who read about it in a book or watched the Martin Sheen movie, The Way, and then said, I think I'd like to do that one day. And, shout out to Rick Steves and PBS for giving them a little love here. If you haven't seen the Rick Steves series on the Camino de Santiago, we'll link it in the show notes below, because Rick does a great job as well with his European travels. But you saw the Camino and you said, I want to do that. And Pat, was he all in at the beginning? Like,
yeah.
This was.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, he was just like, yeah, let's go do it. I'll give a little bit of a context there. By that point, probably for about 2 years, at least a year minimum, we were just wanting to just do a trip with just the two of us. And we had talked about it, and we had discussed a few different ideas. We thought about maybe we should go to Oktoberfest or just go, to an island somewhere and just kind of hang out as guys and just be there. Cause, we have done trips together, but usually it's with our wives or with wives and kids. And we're just kind of seeking that opportunity to be together, just the two of us, just to hang out. And that was really the goal of it. And we were kind of leaning towards Oktoberfest. It'd be cool to do that and just kind of go explore that. And, but for some reason, life hadn't lined up, because Patrick's youngest, they were in the process of an adoption, and she's from China. And so that was supposed to be like 6 month to a year process, and becoming 5+ years, if I'm not mistaken. So multi-year endeavor for them. And it was just kind of on pause because it was kind of one of those things when you adopt, you just have to, when they're ready, you got to go. So it's not like he couldn't just be on a trip with me and then have to go to China somewhere. So, so we had to kind of wait for that. And then, obviously kind of getting acclimated and having an adopted child and all that. So it was fine. I mean, it's totally great, but we were just kind of seeking that time to just be together. And so when I learned about the pilgrimage, it was completely new to me. I'd never heard of it before. Probably like most people, it's not common here in America. I think it's becoming more and more like well known. But at that time, I'd never heard of it. And, I'm not from a Catholic background, so pilgrimage to me is kind of a new concept. And so I was just like, once I learned about it, I was like, okay, this might be the opportunity for us to do something. And it was just going to be us going on a trip. That was it. There was no movie, no books, speaking, none of that. I was all just, not even remotely close. It was just two idiots going to go try this together. And that was the birth of it, right?
Yeah, as the discussions come about, and you've talked about, there's been a lot of backstory talked about how the movie came about, but there was a comment that was made, and I think it was maybe to Pat, that, we'll find a way to get the time, but you've got to tell this story. The two of you would be selfish not to. And that's
Patrick's boss. That was Patrick's employer.
Yeah.
Pat had a crazy job. He was working like a lot, like sometimes 80 hours a week. Just, but when he asked for the time to go, I was self-employed at that point. I was at home. So for me, it wasn't an issue of time. For him, it was. We don't have month-long plus vacations, it's like 2 weeks or whatever. So his boss it was a condition that for him to go, we had to film it. And I think the direct quote from, his name's Ed, was, Pat asked why. And Ed said, well, if you don't film it, you're selfish and you're irresponsible. There's too much hope not to share it.
Wow.
And we didn't see that at the time at all. It was just, like I said, we're just kind of like, we're just going to go and just do this.
Yeah, buddy's trip, right?
But Ed saw something right then and there, and it was like, I'll get you the time off, but you need to document it, on camera. And we're like, okay, that's a whole nother level of doing a pilgrimage, because, you have to, most people have no clue what it takes to pull off something like that. And financially too. It's not just, you go whip out a GoPro. It's a whole nother level of production, and you got to bring crew with you, and you got to, there's a lot with it. So, so we said, okay. And we started that process. And so I learned about the pilgrimage in 2012, and then, we didn't leave until another 2 years later, because it just, needed the time to get everything put together and time, and it almost fell apart. So even the movie, all of it really it's a miracle. That's the best way I can describe it, because it almost didn't happen. Several times it almost didn't happen, where, we had this big plan at the beginning. I won't go into it because it's a long story, but we had this kind of grandiose plan of doing a live documentary. So we'd do it while we were on the pilgrimage. So it was kind of like a web series, but about a week delayed. So we'd walk a week, and then that episode would air, and then blah, blah, blah. The budget for that was like 1.6 million just for production, not including anything beyond that. Right. And so, we're trying to get sponsors and all that. And everyone said no. And in true Camino fashion, it was stripped back to its just bare essence of just exactly what you need, when you need it. And about a month before we left, our director called us and said, we don't have the money. We can't, we don't have the crew. There's nobody. There's no crew. There was no whatever. And they said, hey, can you delay it a year? And Pat and I said, nope, we're going. So you either send somebody with us or you don't. And about a week later, our director, Terry, calls us back and he said, all right, we scraped together some money, but nobody can film it. We don't have a videographer. You need to, to have somebody leave for 6 weeks, and so anyway, just by chance, or maybe not by chance, right? I guess kind of the beauty of when you set out to do something like this is we met a woman through Patrick's company where he worked, or his healthcare institution. And her name was Teresa, and her son was a videographer. And he worked for GoPro and had done some, high production stuff. And he did when you watch those skiing movies, ever seen a skiing movie? And there are people like jumping off cliffs and, doing all that kind of stuff, like way up. And, these are the guys that film that. They're skiing down the hill backwards, by the way.
So exactly the same kind of thing you were going to be doing.
yeah, skiing, but so we ended up meeting Mike, and he's like, yeah, I can go, and it was just the four of us when we left the United States, and we got to Bayonne, which is, to the west of St. Jean, and we were kind of getting acclimated, and we were there, and Mike's like, there's no way I can carry 100 pounds of gear and film you at the same time. There's absolutely no way. And I remember we were at dinner. This is 3 days before before we start walking. I'm not kidding you. Like, we're in having dinner, and Mike's like, I can't do it. I need some more guys here. Like, we're 3 days out. How are we going to find people to start walking for 5 to 6 weeks? Like, how do you do that? Right. And so we had kind of a call to Jesus meeting. And it was either we pull the plug now, or, we try to find somebody. And Terry said, okay, well, we'll figure it out. And so Mike got on a call, and it was absolutely nuts, Kevin, how this thing pulled together. It was, Mike got on a call, called his buddy Jasper. Jasper was in Seattle on his way to Mount Hood to go skiing, and said, hey, can you be in Spain tomorrow for 6 weeks? And Jasper said, sure. He turned around on the to go back home, stopped at RAI, picked up some gear, hopped on a plane, met us the night before we start walking. He literally shows up at our door at our hotel. We're in St. Jean by this point. And he knocks on the door and opened this door, and I've never seen this guy before. And I said, hey, who are you? And he's like, I'm Jasper. I'm here to help film. And I'm like, do you know why you're here? And he's like, nope.
I'm your guy.
Dude is nuts, and then so he showed up, and we kind of filled him in on what the deal. He's like, cool, great, I'm ready. And then Mike also called his buddy Robin, who lives in Paris, and which is about 5 or 6 hours away by car, and said, hey, we need a production assistant, somebody who drives gear, and so people don't have to carry it, right? Because camera gear is really heavy. And so we said, hey, Robin, can you be down in St. Jean and start walking the Camino? And Robin said, yeah, I'll come down. And so met everybody the night before we start walking. This is like 10 o'clock at night, and we're starting to walk at 7 o'clock in the morning, the next morning. So just that in itself is just the first step in doing something like this. And it was just capture it and let's see what happens. And the result is the movie.
Our guest today is Justin Skeesuck on the Sacred Steps podcast. The film I'll Push You is available through every single streaming service. So jump on Amazon, get on Apple, YouTube, whatever you got in your local communities. Get online. Make sure you've seen I'll Push You, with the story of Justin and Pat walking the Camino de Santiago. You talked a little bit about how the Camino provides, and all of these things came together. And that was the start of the journey. Fast forward to Santiago de Compostela, and maybe the time as you return home afterwards. I'm wondering what walking the Camino de Santiago, making the journey across the Camino Frances, has meant to you in your life.
I think I'm still learning that, even these years later. I think it's when you participate on the Camino and and everyone has their own takeaway. And for me though, I just learned through my experience of going on the pilgrimage, we had so many people step in to help push and pull me through incredibly difficult sections. Some days were easier than, were easier, but there were some days where, like Osebrero or Osebrero, I'm butchering it, but, climbing that, was kind of the epitome of people stepping in to help me. It was almost 17 people to help me get me up to the top of the mountain that day. And
that's really one of the most poignant parts of the film, because prior to that, there had been a number of pilgrims who just volunteered their time, their effort, their strengths, their energy to assist you, to assist Pat, to keep you both moving forward. But on that day, Pat had to step back a little bit because he was hurting, right? We see that in the film. Yeah. And this community of pilgrims kind of just assembles. It's like all of a sudden the Camino provides, and you've got close to 20 people going up this insurmountable mountain with you. It became very spiritual for them, that they were called to be in that place in that moment to lift this dream together, but also to make sure that Pat could make it, right? Like, to give him some strength as well. And that's such a pointed moment of I'll push you.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of, you talk about the Camino provides, and we had been told that before we left. People would say, oh, don't worry, people will help you, whatever. But, you can't rely on that. That's not bankable.
It's not a plan, right?
Right. And so, to have so many people step in and help us through our pilgrimage, and to have, almost 20 people help me, and you're right. To help give Patrick that space to let go, that was a turning point for him, because, and I can't speak for him, but I just know from what we've talked about and experiencing it with him that, he needed it. He needed to step away and to learn how to let go, and to get out of the way, so let other people can step in and do what he couldn't do. And there's absolutely no way he would be able to get me up to the top of that mountain. Absolutely 0% chance. Because you need so much help to get through, and I'm heavy, by the way. So when I'm in my wheelchair, it's about 250 pounds. So it is slow moving going up a hill, and it'll take you straight down if you're not careful. And so to have so many people step in and be like, yeah, I got you. And they were so willing to just do what they needed to do to get me through that. As I look back on the pilgrimage, and one of the biggest lessons I probably have learned and that I try to carry forward is that people are inherently good. There's a lot of good people doing good things in this world, and humanity is alive and well. It's just unfortunate that, kind of every day we, news and those kind of things, that it's just, you don't hear about that. You just hear about the bad and the crummy stuff that's really happening. And really there's a lot of good things that are happening, and people willing to pitch in and help one another when we need it. And I've learned since the pilgrimage that I'm just try to do that. I try to take those lessons and apply those in my daily life. And it may not be as grandiose as climbing Osabura with 20 people. You can have those moments, but community is important, and it really doesn't matter what kind of background we come from. We all want the same thing. We all want to be loved, and we want to be able to give love to others. And we have to be willing to, a lot of people are willing to give it, but a lot of people have a hard time receiving it. And that is a lesson that I've learned throughout my life, living with the disease that I have, is that I have to say accept help every day just to live. But it goes way beyond that. It goes into letting people's journey collide with mine. And if that ends up helping me along the way, or I end up helping them along the way, then that's awesome. That's where love flourishes. That's where humanity flourishes.
We've heard from pilgrims about the impact that I'll Push You made in their lives. And you've been contacted by many. One of the legacies of the movie is a new project, or a recent project that you've begun working on to make the Camino more accessible to those who want to be involved in helping mobility impaired pilgrims make the journey, but also opening the doors and knocking down the walls so that someone who has a disability can make that journey. And I've got a little clip I want to share with the audience, because this is a little introduction to the Accessible Camino project. And let's talk about it after. What we're making
recommendation would be, do not hesitate. Do not hesitate.
Don't even think about it. Jump in.
It'll be the best, hardest thing you've ever done in your life.
Just jump in and just do it.
Do it.
Hey, how you doing? I'm Justin Skeesuck.
And I'm Patrick Gray. We're best friends and subjects of the award-winning documentary and book called I'll Push You, that tell of our 500-mile wheelchair journey across Spain on the Camino de Santiago.
Our journey was life-changing, and we're making this pilgrimage on the Camino accessible to others. And we would love for you to join us, whether you have limited mobility or have a disability of any kind.
And if you want to help someone make a dream come true by stepping in and being hands and feet, we want you to join us.
So whether you walk or roll, you can be a part of an adventure of a lifetime. Apply for one of our accessible Caminos today.
I'm ready to fly.
What are you waiting for?
Let's go.
Oh, I love it.
Okay, elephant in the room time. I have to say, that's probably the most moving video I've seen in the last year. Thank you for what you're doing to make these assessments. I intentionally did not watch that video prior to the show. So I'm very emotional at the moment. What you're doing touched me. One of the legacies of I'll Push You is that you're making the Camino more accessible for those with mobility impairments, and the opportunity for those to be the hands and feet for those who want to make the Camino experience. Can you talk a little bit about how this goes forward and how pilgrims can join this experience?
Yeah, so I could tell you that I think the birth of this was, sometimes the world is telling you something and sometimes you just have to learn how to listen. And that was kind of, in our case, since we came back from pilgrimage, people reach out to me and say, hey, thank you for doing that or whatever. I love the movie, but how do you do it if you're, how do you do this? Like, how do you go on the pilgrimage if you're in a wheelchair? Maybe you can't walk as far or whatever. My brothers is, my sister or my dad or whatever. And I would just spend time just, hour call or 45 minutes or email, just insight on just what my lessons were and things to look out for, just kind of logistics type stuff. And about 8 phone calls in, I'm like, maybe I should do something about this. And so, I talked to Pat and I said, hey man, like, what do you think if we were to take people with disabilities on the last 100K, sorry on in, or, I don't know what that looks like, but look, I know what it takes because I've done it. And so, doing the full 500 miles or 800 kilometers, like it'd be impossible to do that. But the last 100K, I'm like, okay, I think we could make that happen. And so we kind of started figuring that piece out, and we took our first group in the fall of 19, and that's the video we just watched is footage from that, and it was amazing, absolutely amazing. And I think what blew me away was, actually, it blew me away, but also not surprising at the same time, is when we put this out there for people to apply and sign up, it was just, all right, well, let's see where this goes. And we kind of hoped that people would want to be a part of this, and we didn't have footage at the time. It was just kind of an idea. And we had 70, 80 people apply to do it. And we had to turn people away. So I'm like, oh man, maybe we're kind of onto something here. And so we ended up kind of whittling it down to our first group, which is 10 people in wheelchairs. We had a blind lady, and we had 37 helpers from United States, Canada, Australia, and just people come and help and push and pull and just be a part of that. And it we kind of went into it just trying to figure out, okay, can we actually do this? And it went off amazingly. It looks totally different than a traditional pilgrimage, meaning, we don't stay in albergues. We don't stay on the trail. We have to actually go back to a hotel, because people with disabilities need specific, daily regimen and care, and accessibility on the Camino itself is really not there. 99% it's not there. So 98%, there's a little bit, but it's, it's just one of those things where you have to kind of look at it from a different lens and try to make it happen and make it available for people who never thought they would be able to do something like this. Never even crossed their mind, like, oh, well, other people can do it, that can walk, but, I'm in a wheelchair. Like, you can't just push yourself every day. I mean, it's not easy by any means. And so by going on these groups, it's almost like take the pilgrimage as a whole and condense it into one packed, experience. And we try to keep the essence of the Camino, people going and helping one another, and people that come and help push and pull, they know they're there to help push and pull. So it's not like you're meeting random people and they're just like, they don't know what they're getting themselves into. And so the bonds that have been formed out of that is exactly what happens if you were to walk the Camino, from Sarria on in, or even Saint Jean on in, or whatever route you take. It's the same kind of bonds that develop, and that shared experiences. And it's really cool to be, for Patrick and I to be the facilitators of that. We don't prescribe things. If you want to come and help push and pull, then you might push me for a little bit, because we guide the groups. We help guide them. So, I help come push me. You might help come push somebody else, or you might just be walking and talking with somebody else from around the globe. So we did our first group in 19. We're supposed to do 2 in June of 2020, and that got delayed because of COVID, of course. And then we're going to do 2 more in June of 2022. So we cap out the group at around 50-ish. We try to have a 4-to-1, 5-to-1 ratio, meaning for every person that has mobility challenges, we try to have at least 4 people to help them, because we just need that. You just need those bodies. So if people want to learn about the group, just go to accessiblecamino.com, and you can learn about the details of at least the current group where we're at right now. And if you want to apply, then go for it. We'd love to have you. So we have a few spots available, but we are going to be shifting things up coming up very, very soon. Probably by the time this airs, we'll have everything kind of buttoned up by that point. But anyway, we love it. It's amazing. I mean, to see the Camino unfold for somebody who, while you're on the trail, especially somebody who's in a wheelchair, to have them to come into the square, talking about streaming tears of joy and, and all that, because it's just to see that happen for them. I've experienced it, so I know, but just to know that they set out to do something that they never in a million years thought they'd be able to do, and to have so many people come in and help them do that, man, it's like an emotional roller coaster. And it makes it so worth the energy to do one of these groups, because it takes about 18 months for each group of work getting it planned and everything to make it happen. And it's for Pat and I, it's so worth it. So worth the time and energy to make that happen. And so we'll continue to do them as long as they're people that want to do them. And they're awesome.
The site is accessiblecamino.com. We'll link it in the show notes. You can also find it on the I'll Push You website, where Pat and Justin have it linked out there. I have to ask, when you were with the group for Accessible Camino, you're reliving your Camino experience as well, right? And seeing it through someone else's eyes sometimes refreshes, sometimes refocuses, because after 500 miles, when you're just coming up to Santiago de Compostela and that culmination is in sight, there are a lot of different emotions. There are a lot of different, physical exhaustion and mental fatigue and emotional just outpouring that happens for so many people. But getting the chance to see it through someone else's eyes and being there for their first time, what's that like in recalling your own experience?
I think, so it's crazy to know that I've done it twice now. And I have a couple Compostelas, which is kind of cool. Maybe I'll go for the world record of how many times a person in a wheelchair.
Somebody call Guinness.
Yeah. But I think the first thing was, going from Sarria on in, I remember on our first pilgrimage getting to Sarria, or Sarria, however you say it. And I was like, man, this is easy from here on out. I mean, because it's nothing compared to what I just went through. So I remember Pat and I had a very specific conversation. I remember it on our first, 500 mile, by the time we got to Sarria, I was almost like, I saw those people kind of starting, with, we call it Camino light, they're carrying a little day bag and just kind of, whatever. And I found myself being judgmental. I found myself like saying, oh, you have no idea what this takes to get this done. That was my first thought. And Pat and I actually corrected ourselves, and thank God we had this conversation, because I was like, but then I realized, oh, that's their Camino. That's their own version of it. And if they're starting from sorry on in, then there you go. They're here, they're doing it. And so ever since I had that conversation, it has reminded me that when we went back to take the group, we're starting where in that same town where I was being judgmental. And so, people are probably looking at us going, oh, they're only doing it from sorry now. I mean, they may probably not be thinking of that, because it's a bunch of wheelchairs. It's not an easy task by any means, but we're not carrying gear. We're not carrying bags. We hadn't suffered to the extent to get, but from sorry on in, you're pushing a wheelchair and pulling a wheelchair, you're suffering. I'm telling you that right now. I mean, it is not easy, and you're going to be working hard to get, me up a hill or somebody else up a hill or down a hill. It's work. And I remember just thinking about that. But then being back on the trail again, it reminded me that, oh yeah, I forgot about this part. I forgot about this hill, because maybe I was a little glossed over or glazed by that point in, but I was like, oh yeah, there's some hills, there's some work to be done, on that last 110 kilometers. So, there's some water you got to cross, there's bridges, there's, some hills, you got to go down some stuff, you got to be carried. I mean, it's not easy stuff. And so it's kind of a good reminder of just like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. And to be reminded of some of those lessons I had been learning on my first pilgrimage. But I was more, when you're leading a group, I'm not really thinking about myself too much. I'm thinking about others that are on the journey, because we're responsible for them. So just making sure everyone is where they're supposed to be. And we have guides with us, and make sure nobody's getting lost and hurt and stuff like that. So, it's a different, way of looking at the pilgrimage when you're responsible for 50 people, but it's so amazing to see just their experiences and like the conversations. I mean, when you're sitting at a cafe, kind of in the middle between some towns or whatever, you're just having those moments, and you're seeing those conversations and people getting to know one another and learning about one another, and to see that from a observatory angle I was like, oh yeah, they're getting it. They're getting it, what it means. Right. And it's just like this wonderful, beautiful thing to think that, okay, it took 18 months to get here, but this is totally worth it, because watching them, people go get drinks for somebody else or whatever. I mean, I had people, because those of you may not know, I have to be fed, I can't use my arms. I cannot lift my hands to my face. So, to have people come along this journey that I didn't know as well, and they're feeding me dinner and they're helping me drink, and, the experiences of them, they've never done that before for somebody else in that vulnerable state, like I bet you, Kevin, if you and I were to sit together and have dinner, you would be feeding me. Like I'm like a kid at the table. You'd be feeding me, but I try to make people feel relaxed and like it's no big deal, because it really isn't. It's just you just have to, kind of navigate through that. But to have people just pitch in and just help and just be so willing to do it, people to pay to come and suffer is kind of crazy concept, but it's like the most amazing thing to witness, just that beauty and love that we can share for one another.
For those that are listening on your podcast app, we are linking all of these videos in the show notes. So click them and you can watch these videos. The speakers in the video are given their firsthand relatable experience because they've completed it. And you hear them say, just do it. Don't wait. Do this. And that gets me, right? Like, because I feel like I reached a point in my life where maybe I waited too long to do some of the things that I should have done. And you've talked about that before. And you say, life is to be lived and go do it. That's an important message for people to learn. But I'm also thinking about, in your story, your wife, in my story, mine, my family, those people who have spent time supporting dreams or encouraging dreaming, and then this accessible Camino experience comes along, and it's something that maybe they thought to themselves, my loved one, won't get an opportunity like that. And then this opportunity comes around. What's it like for the family members who are supporting pilgrims, either in person or at home while they're making this pilgrimage?
Everyone has their own unique kind of way they look at it. I know especially when it comes to, if you're living with a disability or maybe you can't see, or maybe have a cognitive or developmental disability, we try to open up the doors for all types of disabilities. But they're usually, when it comes to something like this, it is not an easy ask, because from my experience, people living with a disability, you get so accustomed to having your own routine in life. And it's very important for that. It's more important than the average person, because like for me, I'll give you an example. When I'm at home, I have a very specific way of how I live my life. So like getting in and out of bed, for example, how do I get my clothes on? Showering, bathroom, those basic things that the average person can just jump out of bed and throw on their clothes and go take a shower, or not throw on your clothes and take a shower, but you know what I mean. The daily living things, that's just in the home. That's not including, like, what if I have to go to the grocery store? I have to get the van out. I have to get the ramp out. I have to go in the van. It's just like, that's a process. Yeah. And so it's not an easy way of living. And so to ask somebody to say, hey, I know that I recognize that you live in this specific way that you live because you have to, just to live. How about completely uproot yourself from your comforts of your own home and go across the world and do something that is incredibly difficult and you don't know what the outcome is going to be? Is it going to cause you physical pain? Is it going to be, uncomfortable for you? Are you going to be able to get in and out of bed? Or are you going to be, all those things that you get, like I just said, that you get that routine, how to live. If you were to completely wipe all of that away and plop somebody down in a foreign country, and say, go for it, let's do it. It's a big ask, man. So I know that going into it. And when we open up the doors for these Caminos, we get those people. We get people who are like, I want to do this, but I'm afraid of X, Y, Z. And that's not even including like getting on a plane. For me to get on a plane in a wheelchair is not easy. If you watch my film, you'll see Pat transferring me up and down, up and down, up and down. I got to get manhandled the entire way. That's the way that it is for people. But what we do is, we interview everybody and we just let them know this is what it is. And we're here to guide you. We're here to give you try to give you the most comfortable way of going about it. And we will, if you want to do this, we can make it happen for you. And we don't pressure anybody by any means. It's just, hey, if you want to do this, we got you. And we've tried to remove as many barriers as possible that people will face. And I kind of take the role of a coach and guide people. And that's how to find the right flights. How do you make sure that, okay, this is what's going to happen if you go to Madrid airport or Paris airport. This is what's going to happen to you. You're going to be whisked away in a different car than everyone else getting from the plane. And, all these like little nuances of living with a disability. And that's just to get them there. So I know that when they're there, that is a big deal. It's a big, big deal. And so I, try to recognize that and give them the encouragement and coach them along the way. And then of course you have the family members, right? And that's just the person with the disability. You're not including family members. What if you have a spouse that may or may not want you to go? Ones if you have, everyone's family situation is different. And we've had those people who have applied where it's like, my wife is not on board with this, or my husband is not on board with this. And Pat and I make that determination. Maybe you're a good fit. Maybe you're not a good fit. We don't want to ever, get in the way of that. So, but we also have the situation where, I'll give you an example. We have somebody coming with us with one of our groups. Amazing story. I mean, we have some amazing stories. This guy who has a condition, and there was 3 brothers. So he had 2 other brothers that had the same condition, and it's a neurological condition, but you pass away from it. And 2 of the brothers have passed away from it. And this guy's coming, and they do a kind of a trip every year with all of their family. And so like a third of the group is his family of one of our groups. I mean, he has, cousins and brothers and sisters coming to help get him, on the pilgrimage. And so it's just to see that side of that, where everyone is so supportive that they're all willing to give up their time and energy and money to come make this a dream for somebody in their family. It's mind-blowing. And, of course there's probably some trepidation. That's part of that. But to see so many people rally around him in particular that's what it's all about, is to give that opportunity for him to achieve a dream that he wants to do before he dies. And so many people from his family just saying, yep, I got you. I'm here for you. And I'll come and I'll help make this a dream for you. I will suffer along with you to make this happen. It's remarkable. I mean, how do you even put words to that, really? I mean, it's just pure love right there. So I hope that answers your question, but
I think that answers a lot of questions for a lot of people, to be honest with you. I mean, at the end of the day, how do you measure love, right?
Yeah. Can't.
But I can show you what it looks like, and that's certainly part of what Accessible Caminos is all about. Your story, Pat's story, are the foundation for children's book, for the I'll Push You story, for I'll Push You the movie, the Accessible Caminos project. I have to ask, what's the legacy of your Camino experience when you look on it? How do you see it, and how do you think others think about it in terms of the point at which maybe they learned or they started to see themselves in this experience?
It's a good question. I think for me, the legacy I want to leave, I think I probably, because I'm a father of 3, so I think I'm more focused on that than trying to leave a legacy for everyone else. But, I just wanted to let at least my kids know a couple things. Number one is that you can achieve anything in life if you put your mind to it. And if you're willing to take a step of faith, not know where the end is, it's going to look different than how you imagined. But if you believe in it and you trust in it, then you can achieve pretty much anything. But the other part of that is, I think what I'm learning as we've released this film and books, is that we have the ability to bring light into the world. We can be that beacon of good for others. And that doesn't mean you have to be perfect. That doesn't mean you have to have everything all completely ironed out in your life and that you don't bring along baggage or that you don't struggle with anything. Because we all have very difficult things that we, some probably greater than others, but we all have something that we're dealing with, right? So but through that, we have the opportunity to bring light into the situation and seek light through it. But in order to do that, you need others. You need community. You need, for me, I'm fortunate. I have Pat in my life. I have other guy friends and also female friends. And my wife, of course, is my champion. But it goes way beyond that. It's the people in your life that can help carry you forward when you need it. And to help you hold up the light when your arms are tired. And so I just hope that when people look back, or if I look back at my life, that I can go, I did my best to try to make this world a better place. And I'm not looking to change millions and millions of people. I'm just looking to impact a person at a time and just take every day at a time and just do the best that I can with that. And there's some days I don't feel like doing that, and that's okay. We all have bad days. We all have those days, right? But on a whole, I have to look back and go, okay, have I done my best to try to help move the needle forward as much as I can? And, if I've done that, then I've lived well. And loving people where they're at, despite who they are, that's the best for me. That's the meaning. That's the meaning of love and life, is to love somebody where they're at and encourage them and say, we got this. We got this. Not only you got this, but we got this together. And the Camino is a great metaphor for that. At least for my point of view, is that if you let people in to your journey and let them collide with yours, then truly amazing things can happen. And I'm still learning those lessons. I'm still kind of living that out. And it takes work, but I'm going to enjoy this life for sure.
Well said. Justin Skeesuck, thank you for coming on the Sacred Steps podcast. We'll link the books, the movie, and accessible Caminos in the show notes below. It's been so wonderful to spend time with you. I hope to see you on the Camino someday soon. Buen Camino, my friend.
Buen Camino. Adios.
This has been the Sacred Steps Podcast. Visit sacredstepspodcast.com for episode notes, links, or to contact Kevin. Watch us online on YouTube. We read every comment. Please add your review and feedback. Before you go, tap subscribe to have episodes added to your playlist. Until next time, Buen Camino.